Good evening. I'm Councillor Annabel Blackmore, the Chairman of the Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Policy Advisory Committee. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this meeting this evening. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings this evening? I ask so that people at the meeting will know this is happening. If the fire alarm sounds, and we have had a fire drill before, if the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and the members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on evacuation of the building if this is deemed necessary. So if we could move on to agenda item 1, which is for apologies. I'm not aware of any apologies for tonight's meeting. Agenda item 2 is notification of substitute members. Well, no apologies equals no substitutes. Agenda item 3, urgent items. There are no urgent items this evening. Agenda item 4, notification of visiting members. I'm not aware of anyone in the room, and I don't believe there's anyone online. Agenda item 5, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures, members? Sorry. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? Any disclosures? None? Thank you. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? Thank you, Councillor Comance. Help is always appreciated. Agenda item 7, to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I move that all items are taken in public because there are no yellow papers. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. So if we move to item number 8, these are the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of January. You will note from the front cover that there are no pages specified. It's actually pages 1, 2 and 3. So if we go through those, page 1, page 2, page 3, any amendments that anyone wants to make? Are those agreed, members? Thank you. They will be signed as a correct record. If we move to agenda item 9, again, this hasn't been reflected on the front page of our papers, but this item can be found on pages 4 to 9 of our pack. Can this be noted? Is that agreed, members? Thank you. If we now turn to item number 10, this is the Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plan update, which can be found on page 11, starting at page 11 of our pack of papers. And we have with us Miss Collier in the room, and then Mr. Wilderspin remotely, and the item will be introduced by Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cooper, over to you, please.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much. I think the Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plan update is largely very good news this evening. There is a whole host of successes. Without reading the papers out to you, I just want to highlight some of the key points here. So we were placed joint 35th of 186 councils on the implementation of our action plan, and that was by Climate Emergency UK, and we are number 2 in Kent. We've had just shy of 2,000 visitors to Maidstone's Eco Hub, huge reduction in scope of carbon emissions. A huge amount is because of the improvements at the leisure centre. 17% of the council's fleet have been upgraded to EVs. We've sent people on carbon literacy training, and all manner of good things. As I go through the report, most of the things are in progress, are on track. There's a couple of pointers in there. So, for instance, one of the actions there tonight is to actively participate in the Quality Bus Partnership. Well, we're scrapping that. We're going to do something better. We're going to actively participate, hopefully, subject to this evening's advice, in something that might actually have some teeth. So, of course, we can always do more. We continue to do more. We're moving forwards all the time. All I would urge members to consider this evening is that what we have to do when we do move forwards with this, we've got to work within our budget scope, because we have competing demands from our residents. I think we're getting the balance right here. I think we're making really good progress. I'm aware there's a lot more to go. It isn't just about saving the planet either. A lot of these things save the council a lot of money in reducing our energy bills. So it is all round good news. I'm joined by our climate change and biodiversity guru, James, virtually, and all-round guru, Anna, who's sitting next to me. So any questions I can't take, I would be delighted to field to one of my experts. Thank you.
Well, at this moment in time, Councillor Cooper, I can't see anyone indicating, but I would like to know a little bit more about the Eco Hub, if that's okay, because clearly it looks as if it's been a riveting success.
It has been an amazing success, but I might ask James to come in, because it was James and Gemma's idea that they've pulled together and have arranged and run 2 years on the trot. So I really feel like he probably earns the right to talk about it. So James, are you happy to give members an overview on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so the Eco Hub we ran from 6 weeks this year. It was on the back of last year, where we piloted the project, and we had 800 visitors last year, so we've more than doubled that this year. We had a deal with the mall just below Maidstone House offices. So our our engagement officer put together a good program of different events, and we had 18 different businesses that we partnered with, local businesses or with sustainable credentials, yeah, a lot of positive feedback from users of the information centre, and then we had giveaways and things like that. And I think we've learned some more lessons. We've learned putting it over the summer, we're competing with the sun, so there was a lot, days where we had less people because they were out enjoying the sun. So we might look at different times of the year, and especially target around the half term and towards the winter, if we're looking to do more insulation and raising awareness for residents about lowering their utility bills. So yeah, it was a good success this year, and we're looking to expand it and try something new this coming year.
Lovely, thank you very much. Councillor Cleater.
Just a question on page 16, 2.9, regarding emissions from our depot fleet vehicles. It wasn't available for tracking in 2022, but it says the largest cause of emissions was the heavy-duty waste collection vehicles used for our commercial waste service. I'm just wondering if there's any plans to sort of improve that fleet. Obviously we've got them, but when we come up to renew them, are we looking at ways that we can make them more environmentally friendly?
Councillor Cooper.
I honestly don't know. That falls outside of the remit of my portfolio and the remit of the this policy advisory committee. I am aware from discussions that I've had at Cabinet relating to waste vehicles and what have you, that it is an area which is almost impossible at present to get emissions down significantly. I will ask, and perhaps if someone from Democratic Services could remind me, I will ask that Councillor Garson answers that question specifically, if I may, to Councillor Cleater and the committee. But thank you.
I think it's a very valid point, actually. There's no point in stressing the good things if we're not prepared to address the bad. So I think it's a point well made, actually. Councillor Trubinski.
Yeah, just a simple question, really. When we look at the carbon emissions of the council, do we include travelling to work by the employees and travelling indeed to these meetings by councillors?
No, that's not included. However, we do collect that data for staff. So James and his team have been gathering the data on staff's travel to and from work to look at how that can be reduced through other schemes such as car share and using alternative methods.
I think Councillor Cooper might have a little bit more to add, but we will come back to you, don't worry. Councillor Cooper?
Just on that as well, I was asked last year, as sort of part of the climate change update last year, whether I would consider imposing a policy to charge staff members to park internal combustion engine cars under Maidstone House, to which I certainly said no. I did not want to discourage people from physically being able to get into the office. And indeed, particularly during a cost of living crisis, when, let's face it, a lot of people simply can't afford to update their cars to electric vehicles. That's not to say I don't think there is more that can be done, and I do welcome what Anna has said, and I will be following that up. But in terms of actually, costing staff members cash, I really think that's the wrong way to go about it. But there are better ways.
Councillor Trubinsky, I know you've got more to say.
Well, yeah, it's just if we've got the figures, I think they probably should be included in our footprint. But I would also agree that we shouldn't be charging staff for using internal combustion engines to come to work. But I do think if we've got the figures, then we should include them, personally.
For sure, we are working on it. We've just got to make sure that the data is robust. We've tried. It needs to be right before we can start including anything.
Are you happy with that? Perfect. Councillor Commands.
Thank you. Rather than charging staff to park, why not give them an incentive to use a push bike? I know that Arriva, they actually bought their bus drivers, if they want to ride their bike to work, they'll buy them a bike. So, there might be other ways.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, there certainly are plans to get more secure bicycle storage in the vicinity of Maidstone House and other parts of the town. So it isn't just council workers who we would be encouraging to come by bike, but certainly that is something that we are looking to do. There's limited parking spaces available under Maidstone House as well, so people who can come by bike. Not only does it improve our carbon footprint, improves their health, but it's a win-win all round.
Right, now I've got two. I've got Councillor Trubinsky again and Councillor Jones. Oh, sorry, Councillor Commands, did you want to add anything further?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Trubinsky.
Just a very quick point on that, Councillor Gibbons. I used to cycle in from South London into town a couple of times a week. Definitely need a shower afterwards, so everyone's going to have to start putting in shower facilities.
There are already showers there. Yeah. Councillor Jones, then Councillor Cleater.
Thank you. Just a question about the tree planting and rewilding. It said that there's an estimated 6,000 trees to be planted in spring 2024. As I understand it, these whips can only be, they can't be used for hedging, I've been informed. I don't know. I mean, I work with a lot of two main environmental groups. Hedging, we could take as many whips as you can throw at us to create new hedges, but we haven't got the acreage to plant for isolated trees. Don't know if that's correct or not.
Councillor Cooper?
I'm not entirely sure. Again, it does fall outside of my remit, but I wonder if we could get, I don't know if Anna or James is aware. I'm sure they can answer very quickly now.
It will have been online. Are you aware? Did you hear that last question?
Yes, I did. So the project we have ongoing is generally rewilding and planting whips to regain forest and canopy cover for the borough. But we have on some of those projects increased the the hedgerows around existing fields, and it's in line with DEFRA recommendations. So it can be done, but it's not mainly what we're looking at.
Does that help, Councillor James?
It does, but if that information can come out to environmental groups, because as I say, whips for hedging, we can plant as many hedges as you like, but we haven't got the land to, and particularly the woodland that I'm working with, 600 acres of ancient woodland, we don't want more trees. We're coppicing, we don't need trees in that sort of environment, but we do need hedging material. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councillor Cleater.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just quickly coming back on a point that Councillor Trubinsky made, one of the issues for elected members, for all of us, we would all love to use public transport to come to meetings. I would. No bus for me, and I live in Maidstone, by the way. So I think it just highlights the importance of the next bit on the agenda, which is this bus strategy. I think people would love not to be using their cars as much, but the fact of the matter is, if you live in Kent or you live round here, you've got to get anywhere out of that. And as a woman, I know that many women are quite nervous about being out and about at night, walking, cycling, whatever, and I think we need to bear that in mind. And I'd just like to have some clarification on point 2.14 around domestic housing net zero. That there's some good stuff going on there, and they're looking in terms of a net zero scenario for existing housing across the borough, but sort of how far are we in it to get that, and how would people access that, or are we just talking about our own stock that we hold? That clarification would be useful, because I do think a lot of people would love to be able to, if you like, retrofit their house, make it more eco-friendly. It's just how to go about that with not getting ripped off by scam merchants, to be quite honest.
Councillor Cooper.
I probably will ask James to give a little bit more detail in this regard. So I believe there are two aspects. One is the housing policy within the council, and certainly having looked at having been involved with some of the planning applications or developing the for the council's housing. I'm aware, obviously, with making sure we're using the latest technology where possible and where practical. But in terms of retrofitting, we are very much reliant on national policy and certainly national grant funding to make that available. James Wilson may have a bit more details than I have mustered up, so apologies.
Just to add to that, yeah, the software that we now have access to, this it has a net zero scenario for the borough. So this is new. This has only been with the council for a couple of months, but it's enabling us to we can look at different zones and of the city and in the countryside and see where potential projects are for heat networks or solar projects or retrofitting, and where different types of houses would be more suitable. And we can do it we could look by demographic, and basically at the moment just coming up with strategies and trying to work out where problem areas would be or where we would look to seek for funding. So it's new software at the moment, and we're still working out all the areas that we could delve into it.
Does that help, Councillor Cleater? Perfect. Are there any other questions from any other members? No? In that case, Councillor Trubinsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would actually like to sort of reinforce the fact that the funding is really quite crucial to this, because I know a number of my residents are quite happy. They've got a house, they've got their current heating systems and things, but they don't have the capital to change. And even, taking into account the increased costs that we've seen over the last couple of years, most people look at payback, don't they? They say, right, I can invest this much. How long is it going to take to get it back? Now, if you're looking at 10, 15 years, it's a really difficult call for most of the residents to actually do that. So I think, we really need to push for funding for this, for grants, which will make people more relaxed about investing into upgrades.
Well, I think it'll certainly make people look at it twice rather than look at it once and say, I can't afford to do that. Okay, so if we turn to page 12 of our agenda pack, there's one recommendation. I'm happy to propose that from the chair. Is that seconded? And is that agreed, members? Thank you. So if we could turn to page 32 of our agenda pack. The next item is, thank you very much, Ms. Collier, and thank you, Mr. Wilderson. This is agenda item 11, and it is about the formation of a new local bus focus group, which is unique for Maidstone, but there are others which have been formed across Kent. We're joined by Mr. Edgerton and Mr. Gilbert. I don't believe we have anyone else online, and I think Councillor Cooper is going to open for us.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. So I'm sure members would pay particular attention to this. It has been an ongoing saga insofar as Kent County Council stopped the quality bus partnerships getting on for 3 years, 2.5 years ago. I think I've attended one since I've been at council here on the basis that they stopped. And they didn't have a ready-baked proposal to replace them. And there has been a tremendous amount of legwork by Tom to my left here over the last couple of years to try and get some traction from Kent County Council to see what we can do. Indeed, they now have come up with a set of proposals, although it is unique. Although this particular one is unique to Maidstone, it is sort of a county-wide structure, and it's sort of 4 concentric circles. It's like Dante's circles of hell, I suppose, but hopefully it won't work like that. And they essentially go from the most strategic county-wide, and then gradually they move down. Largely where we will be able to have the most influence and input is in the sort of the lowest of the tiers, which affects our borough. You can see what it is in front of you. I think it is very good news. I've requested that we get, instead of this just being a closed shop between officers and a cabinet member where possible, that this reports regularly back to the JTB so that there is some accountability for this. And then we can see how things move. I also think it is something that once it is up and running, we will want to keep an eye on how well it functions, whether it's going to achieve anything for transport within our borough, so that we can see if any improvements to be suggested to Kent County Council would be necessary moving forwards. I'm happy to take any questions. Madam Chairman, before I finish, I apologise. There is a second recommendation which I am to seek. But I didn't know about it. Nobody sent it to me until Mark Bronson in front of me. So the recommendation is obviously 1, to create the local bus focus group to allow for interaction and work on strategic issues with bus operators, and 2, to give delegated authority to the head of spatial planning and economic development in consultation with the cabinet member for planning, infrastructure and economic development to commit the monies received from the authority bus subsidy revenue grant totaling £39,766 in accordance with the grant funding agreement as outlined in point 2.4 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. And that can be found on page 40 for anyone who is slightly concerned. So if you look at page 40, under section 3, we have available options. And the first option refers to the formation of the new group, and then also the delegated power that Councillor Cooper referred to. Now, Councillor Trubinski is on my list for questions. Is there anyone else? Thank you, Councillor Jones. So, Councillor Trubinski, to you first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This subject is fairly close to my heart. We've had the bus that goes from Grafty Green through Oldcombe, through Kingswood, etc., cancelled. It now, through the hard work of a couple of the parish councils, has been reinstated once a week. So you can get a bus from Grafty Green at, I don't know, 9 o'clock in the morning, gets into, no, probably earlier than that, gets into Maidstone at 10, and you have to get the return bus by 1 or something like that. That's once a week. So my thoughts, I would welcome a focus group, but if there's no more money coming for these services, then actually it's a waste of space and time. So I'd like to know how this focus group will actually benefit us if there's no money to upgrade these services. To me, these services are very important, and it's a chicken and egg situation. I know there have been reports that said, oh, this bus isn't used, this bus isn't used. Well, actually, that's because those bus services were not maintained properly. They were not, people couldn't rely on them. And if you're going to run a proper bus service, you need to be able to rely on them. There's no good getting to Maidstone and then finding the last bus home at 11 o'clock at night to Grafty Green has been cancelled because, you've got to pay 30 quid for a cab or something. So I would just like to know how exactly this is going to benefit if there's no more money forthcoming. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Drabinski, on page 36, 2.4, it does mention a funding allocation. And I don't know whether Councillor Cooper or Mr. Edgerton or Mr. Gilbert are able to, if any of you gentlemen can furnish us with a few more details, that might be useful to allay Councillor Drabinski's fears.
Well, I don't think I can allay Councillor Drabinski's fears completely because, quite frankly, if there ain't no money, we're not going to get much. However, I don't think that is a good enough reason for us not to sit around the table, because if we don't sit around the table, we can be sure that we'll get Sweet Fanny Adam. Whereas if we do, hopefully we will get something better. Madam Chairman, you're looking at me. I've heard you say worse. But it's true. If we don't take a seat at the table, then we are sure to get absolutely nothing from it. Taking a seat at the table is better than doing nothing. In terms of and at least then we can argue to have funding directed. We can have some influence. I'm not suggesting that in a matter of weeks I single-handedly will save every bus service in the borough that has been stripped over the last 30 years. Far from it, but we'll put ourselves in a better position, and I do think it is worth doing because we've had very little influence and over the time that we have had nothing.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. However, I understand we have to have a seat at the table, but equally, every single member of this room doesn't want it to be just a talking shop where people turn up and say lots of lovely things, but nothing happens. So I think you need to understand that sentiment too. I will come back to you in a minute, Councillor Drabinski. I think Mr. Edgerton wants to add something.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, and thank you, Committee. I think it's important to note that officers have done quite a bit of research in respect of the options which have been presented with this. And one of the reasons we have recommended this option of the focus group is that there is, in fact, a little bit of potential for some funding associated with joining this overall framework, which includes the focus group. And I just wonder if it's possible to hand over to Mr. Gilbert, who might be able to provide a little bit of detail in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah, part of the KCC new framework, they get allocated money by central government to this bus service improvement plan, which this group would be a part of. So they've been given an allocation over the last 2 years of 35.1 million. So, and obviously this going forward will be the structure that money is allocated. So it sort of refers back to the points we previously made, that if we're inside the structure, we could obviously then put our case forward to increase the allocation in future years for Maidstone for particular issues that we might have.
Okay, Councillor Drabinski, do you want to come back on that point?
Well, just that I did say I would support that group being formed, but my concern is where the money comes from. You hear I know it's Transport for London and they've got lots of money, but you know they're just putting another. I think they said seven. It's being advertised at the moment, 7,000 bus stops in with the live routing on it. Fantastic. I know they've got more money, but you know, in fact, we probably need it in the rural areas more than they need it in London. They get buses all the time. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
However, I think London has close to 10 million people and we have fewer. But I'll just make that aside. It's not a competition. So on the list, I've got Councillor Jones, Councillor Cleater, and Councillor Grigg.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to support the comments made by Councillor Trubinsky. I think the rural areas are severely underserved. We do have a few more buses than your area in Bredhurst, but you see the rush hour traffic and the rush hour buses are pretty well, you know, not full to capacity, but they are. There are several people on them, but during the day, I don't understand why they send these huge single deckers through our village with one person on it. They've got to have minibuses. They've got to have like a people carrier, or it's time to think about other things other than these great big single deckers churning out all the emissions with one person sitting on it. So that is something I think to think about. And the focus group, I'd like to understand who will be invited to participate, and again that the rural areas must be you know, represented, and really sort of what power will it have, as you say, if it's just a talking shop. You know, there is not much point to it, but hopefully, you know, there will be some money from somewhere. You know, I know residents in Sandling, in one of the rural areas, that they don't have a bus service at all. You know, they have to walk out to the to Bluebell Hill or to the Running Horse. When you've got children and buggies and shopping and everything, it's just, yeah, no pavements. It's just, you know, not a service that they can use. So the rural areas must be looked at, and I'm sure many more people would like to use buses and public transport if it was available. Thank you.
And reliable. Councillor Cleater.
Totally agree, Madam Chairman. Reliable. If you want to know why people don't use buses, it's because half the time they turn up when they want to or not at all. And I think that's part of the problem. In terms of this paper, the issue is accountability. So we can go and we can put our good ideas, etc. But who holds mainly Arriva and Stagecoach to account? Because they just seem to do whatever they want. We give them money. Arriva give us their clapped out old buses from all over the country and place them in Maidstone, and there is no accountability with this multinational owned company that seems to be ruling the roost. The whole point of bus privatisation was to introduce more choice and more local accountability. It's had completely the opposite effect. So until we can hold Arriva and Stagecoach to account, and talking to colleagues more in the south of the county, Stagecoach are a wee bit more amenable to listening to the local people rather than Arriva, I think we're in real trouble. So if we're having a local group, committee, whatever we want to call this, it's got to have some teeth to hold people to account. I'm not against having this, but I think it's got to have a purpose, and we've got to have input. At the end of the day, we all represent areas. I'm lucky in my area because we have got a bus service in the area I represent, but it's probably, along with the 101 and the 71, those two buses that go into Shetway and Parkwood are about the only regular bus service that we have round here. Other than that, you're at the whim of the operators. So for me, I will not vote against this. I'll vote for it, but I think we need to review it and ensure it has some teeth to actually deliver. Otherwise, as the Joint Transportation Board became, it was just us turning up and nobody doing a report, getting no feedback. So for me, I will vote for this reluctantly, but I want to see it have some teeth and have some accountability, so that when we raise things on behalf of residents of the borough, that there is some accountability and feedback, and we can influence change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. I think part of the problem, and actually, to be fair, Councillor Cooper did allude to this in his opening remarks. If we don't do this, then we don't have any presence whatsoever. So it's almost as if our hands are tied, which is slightly frustrating. But I think Councillor Cooper and I think Mr. Edgerton and Mr. Gilbert can probably sense the frustration across members' comments. Councillor Grigg.
Without wishing to repeat what's already been said, I must admit when I first saw this, my very first thought was talking shop, which is exactly what we said. And I do worry about how it's going to influence change and how reliable it's going to be to make decisions. You know, bear in mind, we're now talking about a 6-monthly meeting rather than 3-monthly, with reports going to the JTB. Well, sorry, cynic in me, how much actual use is the JTB? And it's an advisory thing anyway. So I sort of saw this, yeah, we have this focus group, we make these decisions, but it goes round robin, but no one actually makes a decision. So that's my worry on it, is that, yes, I mean, I will also go with it because we have no option. But actually, I think we need to review it and say, do you know what? This is great, but we're just going around in circles and no one's actually making a decision. The other thing I did wonder was about our member representation. Delegation to our cabinet member. I have no problem with that. But would it make sense to have someone alongside it, i.e. potentially a committee chair, in order to, if there are strong things that come up on the agenda, has dual power to bring it back to something that could have more teeth in it to make decisions? Probably haven't articulated that very well, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Councillor Grigg, one comment I've written down here is pass the parcel, because it feels a little bit to me as if, you know, you're just passing it around until the music stops. I think down to accountability, I think the point you've made, should it just be the cabinet member or should there be a wider remit to that? Now, how much control, or do we have an option over that? Or is the body that is essentially forming this, we are told we can only have X or Y? Because I think, as Councillor Grigg has said, and Councillor Cleater and Councillor Jones as well, sorry, and Councillor Trubinsky too, if it is to have any teeth at all, then we need a greater presence and a greater influence. So is that within your remit?
Well, so the proposal that came from county councils was that there would be no member representation from district councils. And when it was presented to me by Tom, at cabinet, an informal cabinet a few Wednesdays ago, I said, well, I won't say what I said, but there's no way that we can just have these closed shops. And that's not, I don't mean to be disrespectful to officers, but officers aren't held accountable in the same way that elected members are. However, I think, you know, that's a point which we should probably investigate how willing KCC are, and particularly on when there are some occasions when there might be business that has particular interest, how well we should be able to represent other groups, because it isn't just members in here that, you know, there are. So for instance, Councillor Grigg will know with Smart previously, and the chairman of the Northleys Residents Association, who's taken, perhaps less so in buses, but has taken an awful lot of interest in public transport matters, and you know, is very knowledgeable about it. So it is something that I have already inquired about and is being fed back. But I think it's treading a tightrope without being too prescriptive, by telling them and being too prescriptive about us trying to extend that too far, if that makes sense.
I think so. Okay, I've got Councillor Cleater and Councillor Grigg. Yes. Okay, Councillor Grigg.
basically, I think that what you've said was my fear. And if the KCC are not willing to have people like Smart along to it and extra people from here, to me that says they haven't got the willingness for it to succeed, because JTB and KCC attendance aren't always very good. So we don't want another situation where we're going, no, this is all KCC, and they turn up and then there really is no decisions. So if they are willing and want this to work, I would want to see that they will invite those kind of people along to it.
Okay, I'll come back to you in a second, Councillor Cleater. Councillor Cooper.
To be perfectly frank, I do share the scant regard that the rest of the committee have for how KCC have behaved, in particular on this subject in the past. I do wish to give them the benefit of the doubt, because I really think if we at this point say no, we're not going to do it because you've let us down before, then unfortunately we, and there is a temptation, of course, to do that. But I don't wish to do that. The only thing I will say, and perhaps it's a ruse on their part, is that these sort of concentric circles of enhanced partnership, EP schemes monitoring group, network and punctuality, they've gone to an awful lot of lengths to sort of establish what the issues were previously and to address them. I don't doubt that. However, I am not entirely sure that it will achieve what it sets out to, which is why I think it would be entirely appropriate in several months' time to come back and sort of to this committee and say, well, this has or hasn't happened. And we can decide from there whether to continue and whether to make a big thing about it or speak to other districts.
Okay, Councillor Cleater.
I'd like to draw the committee's attention to page 38, 2.12, which is outlining. Under the new enhanced partnership BSIP model, KCC have disbanded the QBP, see figure 2. They are proposing to replace them with a borough district lead organisation called the Local Bus Focus Group. KCC are still proposing to be part of these groups. However, they do not propose to organise and administer them. Their proposal is for these groups to still be a forum between borough districts and LTA bus operating companies, but the format for these groups is being left to borough districts to decide and run. So my reading of that is we can set it up how we want it. Or am I wrong? So if we want Smart or anyone else in there, they're in there because it's our responsibility to do it. And if Ashford, Canterbury, Swale, Thanet and Tunbridge Wells are doing it different, so be it. But we're here to represent Maidstone.
It's a very fair point, actually, Councillor Cleater. Councillor Cooper.
I think it is a fair point. My concern is that ensuring we must ensure that there is KCC attendance, because they're the people who have the most teeth in that regard. But I certainly think it is entirely appropriate when there is need, not necessarily at every meeting, but when there is need, to be able to invite outside partners. And I would like to think that Kent County Council wouldn't have any objection to that. And I think when we report back to the JTB and indeed this committee, it will be entirely appropriate to say who has been invited to those meetings.
And what about the bus operators? Are they going to be there as well?
Yes. So the table just above paragraph 2.12, so figure 2, says that the enhanced partnership local focus group, the reps would be KCC Public Transport, KCC District Transport Planner, District Council, Planning and Parking Enforcement, and bus operators.
Let's see whether they turn up or not. Councillor Cleater.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, I really should have disclosed at the beginning that I am currently an employee of Kent County Council, and I should have declared an interest at the beginning of the meeting. However, I don't work in the relevant department that pertains to bus transport.
Thank you for letting us know, even if it is a tad late. Councillor Grigg.
Just one last thing to note. When we go through to our recommendations, is there any way that we can add some need for review on that we would like a review? Because otherwise the review will be forgotten.
I don't see why not, Councillor Grigg. Councillor Cooper?
Might I apologise, I'm not part of the committee, but might I think it is entirely appropriate that this gets reviewed and that it doesn't get forgotten about. Might I suggest that the review point should be after at least 2 of the enhanced partnership local focus groups have occurred? Because what I fear, if we set a timeline and there's only been 1 meeting, it's because by well, the enhanced partnership local focus group should be 3 monthly, but some of the other meetings, for example, the enhanced partnership board, which is county-wide, is only scheduled for once every 6 months. I think it would be entirely appropriate for us to review and indeed to speak to other district councils to find out what their feelings are once this is sort of up and running county-wide.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Jabinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very quickly, the only thing that worries me about the idea that everyone's going to be running their own local bus focus group is there won't be a kind of, or that it doesn't seem like there will be an overall commonality of purpose, which, and I know KCC are going to attend them all, but does that mean KCC, in other words, everyone seems to be doing their own thing, which I don't necessarily think is a good idea.
I think that obviously the district groups, you could argue, are doing their own thing. However, the next stage up encompasses it's sort of an area as opposed to each district. So then that's where it starts mixing in, and obviously it goes all the way up to county level, which is why I sort of described it as it's the 5 cycles of hell here, as opposed to 9. But so I there should be some. It should start sort of. There should be a golden thread that weaves through them, and I think that's the one thing that we really would want to review to make sure that is happening as well. But arguably, the local focus group meetings will be what we make of them, but we should also bear in mind what is sort of happening at the next stages up to ensure that things do get carried forwards if need be. There's no point going to a meeting complaining that bus punctuality is really bad and that some routes have been dropped if that's only ever aired at the district level, and if KCC, let's face it, the bus companies aren't going to. If KCC don't bring that forwards to their higher meetings, then the whole thing will be a bit of a sham.
I think really it's up to us to approach this in a positive spirit so that we can take out of it what we need. Councillor Cleater, did you want to have one more question?
Just a final point. The ultimate accountability for Kent County Council will be when their elections are. So by which time we should have had 2 meetings of this new proposed body. And if officers and members of KCC don't come up with the goods, then people know what they need to do. Because I think we've, in all honesty, pussyfooted around over joint transportation boards and this sort of thing. This is last chance saloon for KCC to come on board with districts and deliver a service for local people. It doesn't matter what, I mean, there's cross-party agreement here on it's not working. They've got to get it working for the people of Kent, and that's all there is to it. So last chance saloon really to deliver, and if they don't deliver, then people know what they can do.
Well, I think it's fair to say it's not for want of trying. I think the districts for many, many years have wanted to forge closer working relationships, and in some areas that's happened and in others it hasn't. But I think there's definitely been a will to do so. Now, are there any other questions that anybody would like to ask? No? Okay, so if we turn to page 33, we have one recommendation on the page here. However, as we alluded to earlier, there is a second one. And I think now that we've got the update as well, there's a third one. So I'm going to ask Ms. Parfitt to read them to us. Number 1 you have, and I think she'll just read them because I think we've also amended the wording for one that makes it clearer. So just bear with us for a moment.
Thank you, Chairman. So, members, the recommendations taking into account the update that the Cabinet Member provided would be that the Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development be recommended to 1. Create a local bus focus group to allow for interaction and work on strategic issues with bus operators. 2. Give delegated authority to the Head of Spatial Planning and Economic Development in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development to commit the monies received from the Authority Bus Subsidy Revenue Grant totalling £39,766 in accordance with the grant funding agreement as outlined in point 2.4 of the report, and to provide an update to the committee after at least 2 meetings of the local bus focus group have taken place.
Okay, I'm happy to propose that from the chair. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Grigg. Is that agreed, members? Okay, were there any, did anybody not agree? No, perfect. Any abstentions? No, okay, lovely. In that case, I believe that concludes our business for this evening. So I will formally close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.